What's happening, my fellow geeks and geekettes? Welcome to a brand new episode of Cosplay Chris, and today it is a Project Fred update. This is my 1:1 scale Part 2 Nightmare on Elm Street 2 Freddy's Revenge display bust. So a lot has happened since I showed you guys that video of making a clay pot of this Robert Englund life card. As you can see right here, he now has some open eyes. So I'm going to explain the exact process that has happened right up to this point. A lot of trial and error has been involved, and it has definitely taken a team effort to get to this point. So starting off, let's talk about the original life cast from that video. So like I said, I needed some open eyes sculpted in this piece. I am not a good sculptor. I have not sculpted in years. The last proper sculpture I did was this guy here. This is another Part 2 rendition. This was all done by me on a Robert Englund life cast, but I needed a sculptor. I needed a full-time sculptor to do the open eyes because, like I said, the eyes are the gateway into the soul, and if they don't look right, and Robert Englund has some very particular looking eyes, and they need to be captured perfectly. So I enlisted the help of Odd Studio here in Sydney. As some of you may know, a couple of years ago, I did 2 weeks freelance work there at Odd Studio for a project for a science museum down in Canberra. It was amazing. I learned a lot. So I asked them if I could commission them to sculpt the open eyes. They gladly accepted. So I took in the bust, and actually one of the artists there, Colin Ware, sculpted the eyes for me. Now, if that name rings a bell to some of you guys, this guy is a pioneer in the movie effects industry. He has worked on everything, but most notably, Colin did the burn makeup for Hayden Christensen when he burns up in Revenge of the Sith at the end of the film. So I gave Colin as many reference photos as I could of Robert Englund back in the 80s, particularly around the 84, 85, 86 mark, where he looks his most youngest and his eyes are on point for in terms of what I wanted. And this right here was the end result. Colin did an amazing job, exactly what I wanted, if not better than what I was expecting. So this piece was then taken to a 3D scanner company out west here in Sydney. It took all but 5 minutes to do. They had like a $10,000 hand scanner. So these guys weren't mucking around. And by that afternoon, I had the full cleaned up file ready to go. So like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, this project has been a collaborative effort. I need some full-time hardcore artists here collaborating with me because I've come to the realization I am not a good sculptor. It's one of those things where you have to keep flexing that sculpting muscle, so I needed some experience behind this project. Of course, why I got Odd/Colin to do the open eyes. So in terms of digitally sculpting the burns, I headed to my good friend Jackson Rupert. Jackson and I have been friends for a few years now. He is a terrific artist, and this guy ticks all the boxes of artistry. So I sent the 3D rendering of Robert Englund to Jackson over in the States. He then went to work digitally sculpting the burns from Part 2, and here is the end result. Here is the final file. Jackson went above and beyond and did an incredible job. And the funny thing is, the guy says he's still practicing and just tinkering around with these things, and I beg to differ. The guy's amazing. I remember seeing a Thanos he did, I think sometime last year, and that's what triggered my brain to reach out and ask him if he'd be happy to sculpt the burns on the file of Robert. So once that file was prepped, done, ready to go, I then sent it to my good buddy Jakey of JTS Cosplay, who 3D printed the file. Now, here is the 3D print. This was printed in PLA, and it was actually printed in 4 pieces. We have the head, we have the middle part of the chest, and we had 2 sides of the shoulders. But upon receiving the print, I really dug this look. It's simple and it just works, and I really like the squared off shoulders. So like I said, this was printed in PLA by Jakey. He did an incredible job, and he actually said it was one of the most detailed prints he's ever done. I then applied a few coats of primer filler and then took a silicon/fiberglass mold. And boom, here is the silicon/fiberglass mold. So it is a traditional glove mold with a 2-piece fiberglass shell. So the idea is to make a clay casting, and then that clay casting will be cleaned up by yours truly. All the details will be refined, all the print lines will be erased, and then it will be prepped for final molding for a production run. And voila, here is the first clay casting. So this method was done exactly the same way that I did with the Robert Englund bust. This is a melted down Monster Maker's clay bust backed up with some expander foam, some rigid expander foam. Now I am using a soft Monster Maker's clay because smoothing out and softening oil-based clay is a little bit tricky. It requires, you know, isopropyl alcohol, thinners, naphtha, even lighter fluid if you really want to be extreme. So the trick is to obviously maintain the beautiful detail that Jackson has captured here and also get rid of the print lines. So it's a bit of touch and go at the moment. So I actually got a bit excited and did a test translucent resin casting out of the original silicon / fiberglass mold. And here is the first test casting out of the mold. Now obviously this is purely just for testing purposes in terms of getting the paint scheme right, because you can still see the print lines along the head here, which is fine, but I just want to gauge and get a good idea of how this guy is going to look once it's all done, dusted and painted up. Now some of you guys are probably thinking it needs a bit more brown, it needs a bit more pink, it even needs a bit more purple. But when you really delve into the part 2 makeup, you'll notice that the color scheme changed throughout the entire film. There was really no continuity in terms of the color scheme of the makeup, and that is nothing against Kevin Yagher at all. These things happen when you're on set, and sometimes the continuity just doesn't match up, or the lighting hits it differently, and then the makeup looks completely different. So in terms of my paint job here, I'm just trying to cover all bases of the browns, the pinks, the purples, and also the translucency. So the final run of production bus will be translucent resin like you see right here. Translucent resin tinted with a little bit of flesh, layered up, is a beautiful blank canvas, and it really adds to the realism. Also tinkered with the idea of doing some versions with the exposed brain from that infamous scene where Freddy tears the side of his head off. You've got the body, I've got the brains. So I actually quickly sculpted a brain in clay on another test clay casting of Freddy, took a mold of it, I then dremeled out this section here and then inserted the brain from the inside and blended it all together and put the gore effects and everything. So ideally, I'd love to do a run of 20 of these guys. When he's all cleaned, he's finally molded, and offer say 10 brain versions or 10 normal versions, or vice versa. Now these eyes are actually placeholder eyes. These eyes actually belong in this bust here. I managed to get one more casting out of the mold for that bust. So I sculpted that thing back in 2012. So the mold had seen better days. A client ordered this and he wanted a custom display bust. So I figured, one last ride. I got one more casting out of it, and then the mold just completely shit itself and just imploded on itself. So these eyes are actually from Fourth Seal Studios. The client wanted Robert's regular eye color for that one, as opposed to the blaring red eyes that Robert sports with the contact lenses in part 2. So for the most part, the production runner bus will have the blaring red eyes unless specified otherwise by a client. And that is where we're at, Geeks and Geekettes. I'm really excited with how this is coming along. Like I said, I needed some amazing artists to help me with this because it is a mixture of digital and traditional sculpture, much in the vein of Ironhead Studios' approach to Ben Affleck's Batman cowl from Batman vs Superman. You know, it was a mixture of traditional sculpture and digital sculpture, and I love that. And I love the collaborative effort of artists coming together and just making something special. And it's really up the ante in terms of my final vision for a tribute bust to Kevin Yagher's amazing part 2 makeup. Speaking of Kevin Yagher, I finally have a name for this bust. Originally, I was going to call it the Male Witch, because that was Kevin Yagher's initial description of the makeup design for Freddy for part 2. He wanted to make him more like a male witch with the hook nose, the sunken eyes, and the temples of his skull protruding through. But then I settled on Yagher 85. I like it, it's quick, it rolls right off the tongue, and it obviously goes hand in hand with Kevin's surname and the year that Elm Street 2 was made. So guys, that is it so far. I've still got a lot of work ahead of me in terms of cleaning up the final sculpture, doing a final production mold, and then getting some prototypes out for some catalog pictures. So I have actually ordered some blaring red eyes for this guy. I'm gonna finally insert them and actually sell this piece because I would like this to go to a home of a collector. I do know obviously that this is the prototype, it's a paint test and there still are print lines, but for the most part it would make a great collectible in someone's collection. Guys, thank you so much as always for watching. I know it's been a while, but I have been very busy with commissions, as you can see there, and as you can see there, that is a 1:1 scale Batfleck bust that I made for my good friend Jamie, known as Quick Draw on Instagram. He's an amazing artist and he actually does mostly illustrations for the Phantom, and the guy is just amazing. So I actually have 2 new cosplay announcements coming up. They were really out of the blue, but I've had them in the back of my head for a while, and I know with my cosplay announcements this year, nothing was set in stone. Everything is really up in the air, and I like that because things change, plans change, you know, what you're jonesing for can change in terms of what you want to do for a cosplay. So I'm very excited about what's to come with those 2 cosplay announcements. So I will be doing probably 1 video covering those 2 announcements this coming weekend, and then probably upload next week. Guys, thank you so much as always for watching. Wherever you are in the world, have yourselves an absolute cracker of a day. I hope you're well, hope you're happy, be merry, be silly, and until next time, geeks, please always remember, cosplayers do it best.